leadership team will expect you to know the business that you're in so they can come to you for advice. Now, these are things I will not compromise on.
Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of the Leadership Blueprint podcast by JH Partners. Today I'm joined by Christian. Over 30 years experience within the maritime industry, over 25 years of that being with the Maersk Group in various locations globally. He's currently doing a number of consultancy and advisory positions, and was just somebody that we were really keen to get on board here today on the Leadership Blueprint podcast, just to have, a bit more of a discussion around somebody that's done some of the corporate life in different organizations and countries, now doing something on an advisory piece. So I wanted to see his thoughts and views on a number of these aspects. And so, as we mentioned, we're always going to start these podcasts off and say, Christian A., thanks for being on here today. And it'd be great just to start off with, what does leadership mean to you? It'd be great to get your definition.
All right. Well, first and foremost, thanks for having me. I'm always excited when I get an opportunity to talk about leadership in any corporate job. I think if you are a leader and if you have good leadership, that is more than half the work done in terms of getting good results. It's can be hard to define, I think, but good leadership is very much about authenticity from the leader, being who you are, not trying to take on a different character in the office than you are outside. Leading, treating everybody the same, upwards, downwards in an organization. Be good at storytelling, getting people along on the journey, and then also helping them along on the journey and making them want to be on the journey and making them comfortable on the journey towards your company's goal or your joint goals and visions, whatever you choose to call it. I think it's been very hard over the years to perhaps find exactly what it means, but I did come across a professor in IMD, George Koolriese, who wrote a few books, Hostage at the Table, and another one, which is one of my favorites, Care to Dare, about secure-based leadership. I've shared that with all my leadership teams in the past decade. And we have used that extensively to work on, because I feel that a lot of the principles there, having the back of your supporting your leaders and helping them along and making them feel that you got their back in their business dealings, I really feel is something that I've seen can accelerate an organization's speed towards decision making and business results. So if you're in that position that you can create a good base for your leadership, a clear vision, but also then letting them know you got their back when you send them out in the market to work, I really see that is something that can speed things up. It requires that a good leader is also willing to relinquish some control. You really need to let go of control to a certain extent. One of my good friends, a CEO in a Danish company, says, keep your nose in, but your hands out. It's one of his favorite expressions. So know the business. Your leadership team will expect you to know the business that you're in so they can come to you for advice, but don't mingle in the day-to-day and don't question their operational decisions. So a lot goes into leadership, but at least to me, that's some of the strong points. And I absolutely think authenticity is key. A hard word for a non-English speaker to say, but I know it's more important to know what it means and actually live it in the organization. I think leadership is a major part of corporate culture, and if you don't have good leadership ingrained in your corporate culture, you can set out any strategy and you won't, in my view, you won't succeed.
Absolutely. You need people to not only understand that vision, but then buy into that vision. And I suppose something that I was keen to sort of explore a bit there, you kind of touched on it, is going from being a manager to a senior manager into a leader of leaders. How did you see that change over time? Were there certain changes you needed to make? Was it how you interacted with people differently? Was it, as you mentioned, nose in, etc., hands out, meetings? How did that sort of happen?
Yeah, I think it was very easy to be very easy to transition into a team lead because you were in your specialized field. For me, it was customer service, and everybody was doing the same task. And you were very much in control, and you could very much actually step in and do the role of everyone in your team. And to me, it was a small team of 10 people at the time. And I do absolutely recall I transferred to a different geographic location, and suddenly I was overlooking a room with 150 people, a very large office with different teams. And I wasn't very old, so I thought that my predecessor had been very successful in the role, and if I just kind of picked up where he left off and did the same thing, I would be successful. And within 48 hours or less than a week, I found out that did not work. First and foremost, it was my predecessor had his hands very much in the machine room, and that was not my nature. And I let my own. I had to remold myself when I went into the office every morning, and it stressed me out to the point that I needed external help actually within 2 weeks of starting in that role, and got guided back to actually a point where they said, well, who are you as an individual? Who are you as think about who you are as a leader, how you want to lead, and think about the organization that you have. You have multiple ex-captains out there with huge experience in running organization and running a ship and knowing what to do, and you need to trust these guys. So focus on the things where you can impact and where you can help them. And that was really a learning experience going to that point where they had much more experience on the operations that you did. So there was no need to question them on these things and let them run with that, but help them perhaps with, let's call it corporate politics. How do you get the message across to headquarters when you are out in the furthest corner of the world? So make it a team effort. Everybody at that level should know who is eventually the decision maker. So you don't have to emphasize on that, but try to, and who sits with the responsibility, also important, but really try to let go, let people run with it, and accept that you can't know all the details. And if the headquarters call, you won't know all the details, and you might have to tell them that you have to get back to them after you checked around. And that was really some of the points that changed from being a manager in a specialized field where you could probably knew 90% of the details in your sleep, and then to a leader of leaders where maybe you knew 10% of the details, but you knew exactly where to go, which of your team could give you what information, and who were doing what, which also made it important. I think the team started to realize, well, he doesn't know the ship's engine necessarily down to the detail, but he absolutely know how the pieces fit together and how it works, and in that way trusting that you could also deliver their message further up perhaps in the organization and get it across in a good way. So it was very much I would say it was a tough experience. I've used it extensively in my leadership discussion, saying that this was really a point where me feeling as a strong leader went from that to almost a nervous wreck within a week of taking on a role. And people say, why are you telling that story? I say it's important because you need to understand the transition, but you also need to understand that it's important to ask for help, even as a leader.
That's exactly what I was going to go on to.
Yeah. So don't think you can necessarily do it on your own just because you have been appointed leader. Find your secure bases that you can go to for assistance, and you be a secure base is one of the terminologies used in the same book for your team. But you have to have your own as well. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
No, completely. And I think you mentioned there, importantly, the communication piece and then the trust piece. So, being able to ask for help knowing when to ask for help, but then also knowing who to trust. And I think,
Yeah.
you know, that all comes with experience, but at the start you need to be willing to at least put your hand up and ask for that and stuff. So as you were kind of finding your feet, growing more, how did you then go about kind of building that culture piece? So that winning mentality, that positivity, you know, as you were finding your own feet, how were you able to also project that, and then obviously over the years grow that further?
Yeah, I think one of the learnings there was to find a balance between being in your comfort zone and leaning out and getting the team to lean out. If you are in a corporate machine or in an organization where things work fairly well, it can be quite easy to fall into the status quo.
Yeah.
And just keep the wheels turning. So I found that that was perhaps when I took over in my first large leadership role, that was how I executed for the first period to land in the role. But then I also found that people are looking to the leader, and if the leader is not taking risks, and I'm not making unnecessary risks, but showing the willingness to go out and challenge, take some healthy risk, push the business, it's very easy for the organization to fall into the same trap and not do that and feel comfortable because, hey, the guy sitting in there, he's not doing any more, so I can do the same. So I found that could a little put an organization to sleep if you were not showing that and showing that was acceptable. I think the thing that I took with me from the years before was, of course, that I knew I was in my specialized field of the maritime industry, so I know the business, I knew the business and a lot of the details, and I developed I call it a internal risk meter also, that allowed me as a leader to listen to ideas from the organization and quite quickly internalize it, quite frankly, in US dollars, almost regardless what kind of decision it was. In my head, it became a US dollar amount, and I could kind of quickly decide whether I should just let them run with it or whether I said, we need to discuss this a little further. And that kind of, I would say, started adding speed to the team decisions and to the business, because in a large organization, you could let quite some big decisions actually flow and let them run. And I found that motivated people as well to an extreme degree. If they felt, well, here's a large decision, and I'm basically getting the trust and the go ahead on that one, and I know that the guy in the corner office in that case will have my back on this one because he signed off on it.
Did that internal risk meter, did that come just through experience, and then the more experience, the more, let's say, risk profile or the higher dollar amount you factored in, or were there things you had to do, train, ask? Was there a way you improved that, or was it just your experience that risk meter, as you mentioned, increased or improved?
Yeah, it certainly came with experience. It also came to a certain extent we worked a lot in basically all the companies I've been in. We work with profiles of individuals and our leaders. So there's no doubt that my profile is a risk profile. Back in the days, 30 years ago, I applied to become a finance manager in Maersk, and they wouldn't let me in. And once I saw my profile, I understood why, because I clearly my profile was go and do the business and perhaps not the control profile. So I can see that for me, that decision was easier than some of perhaps my predecessors that I took over from, that I had an easier time letting go of some responsibility. But clearly, you have to look at your company's authorities, etc., and do it that way, to actually combine the two. So I would say a lot of it came with experience. I've certainly, in my first year as a manager, have sleepless night over decisions that I needed to make, and later on in my career, I would say I made significantly larger decision and slept very well the same night.
No, very true. And did that alongside, so the risk meter kind of, as it were, improving, the experience improving, did that come with you gaining more ability to be a bit more hands off? And you were saying earlier, again, that's subject matter balance, correct? Did it all kind of come hand in hand, or was it a bit chicken and egg? I had to get this right to then do that, or did they all kind of simultaneously happen? Was it the tipping point, at this stage it switched?
Yeah, I think there was a tipping point where some of it, quite frankly, was a bit of chance.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, because I felt a little bit, I'm sitting here with an individual with at the time perhaps more significantly more experience than me, that is coming with something that sounds really, really good, and we can spend a lot of time going through it, or quite frankly, I can extend the trust and start that way. So if we take the monetary risk meter out, and then say that was perhaps where the thought process of saying, well, it's probably easier to extend trust to your team first, to everybody, before you start mistrusting, and then you hope that everybody live up to your trust. And perhaps there will be the one exception during your career, a few exceptions that don't, but starting the other way around, feeling that you have to learn to trust your full team when you come into an organization is an impossible task. You really have to assume you're coming into a team where people are there to do a good job. They're there to win with you. They're playing to win with you. They're not trying to destroy. They're not coming to the office to destroy the business. And if you go in with that attitude, then you'll be pleasantly surprised, or you'll have a good experience most of the time, and only in rare occasion will you have the surprise that you then need to deal with as quickly as possible, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. And you sort of touched on it a bit in terms of adaptability, in terms of growth. And have you, over your career, seen, and again, you mentioned earlier managing a big team, over 150 people at the time and so on. How did you get the balance between a larger team, a larger organization, and flexibility to bring change about? Because normally the larger, the less flexible, but the leader can bring their own flavor to that. So how were you able to get some of that change coming into larger organizations? How did you make some of those impacts?
Yeah, I mean, that is a very good question, because I have sat in an organization where that ability actually, because if you look at for example, the container business industry, it is the big successful companies are trying to streamline it across the globe, to ensure, as many other companies, ensuring that whether you buy a product in the US or in Angola, you're getting the same customer experience, roughly, and no different in the maritime industry, ideally. So a lot of the policies and a lot of restrictions came over the years, I would say, from corporate, in terms of what you could do. But then I also found that on the flip side, if you had an engaged team out in the front line, it was possible to impact how that experience should be, and those ideas, they actually sit with the guys in the front line that have the contact. They don't sit with the headquarters in another part of the world. So I think that was one of the things that we were able to do, and actually challenge the guys the teams that says, well, this is just execution of headquarter politics. Said no, we as a team, they know, have their respect, and we can actually impact global policies from this location, which was something that people found attractive. So I think getting that, having that, you can say, credit at headquarters that they would actually listen to you, of course, is important, but actually getting the team to believe that the ideas that they had could potentially not just impact their local customers, but actually be implemented globally. And then obviously depending on the size of the organization that you're in, but then as a leader, you have to take that forward and kind of showcase that somebody perhaps in your leadership team or in their team, that combined team have gotten something right, and it has been implemented across the globe as a best practice, if you will. I would say we saw a lot of that in my time with Maersk in particular, and it was that flip between, now something came from headquarters, we just had to do it. I said no, adapt, local flexibility to your customer base, which was very much allowed, and saying I'll back you on that one. If you think this is the right thing to do, I have your back. And two, if it's a really good idea, we throw it right back at them and work with them to change it for the betterment of hopefully the total customer experience across the globe. As an example, if it was a customer, it could be operational or anything else. So I think it's a tricky thing. The larger the organization is, to actually make anybody in the team, regardless level, feel that they can have an impact, not just on the one process that they're actually operating, but perhaps feel that they are empowered to bring an idea forward that could perhaps at some point gain global momentum within the organization.
Yeah, and I think your point there around customer service and their feedback, and then obviously saying, that could be the same with operations. I mean, at the end of the day, whether it's an operational efficiency, there is still maybe an internal customer versus external, whatever it might be. It reminds me a lot of the book by by Chris Voss, the Never Split the Difference book. He talks of, he's an ex-FBI negotiator, and then he sort of turned it into a business book around basically compromising in a certain way, and kind of have your line in the sand as to don't compromise beyond a certain point, and how you go about these. And it's a very interesting book. I'd definitely recommend a read. But it's something that you and I had sort of touched on, was this, your leadership style, your ability to listen to the team and trust them, but at the same point, there is a point you don't go beyond when it comes to compromise. And I just was wondering, can you kind of maybe expand on that a little bit? Because I think it's a really important point, and it's something that not many people touch on. So I think it'd be great to expand on that a bit.
Yeah, I think that's also, I would say, from personal experience, but it goes back to perhaps the first talk about being authentic in your leadership style, and quite frankly, I think it's the most important trait as a leader, and it might not be available to everybody, but I found at a certain point in my career that I need to put myself in a position in any job that I take that I essentially don't have to compromise. Doesn't mean I don't want to make small compromises, but I really cannot compromise with who I am as an individual. I have this, I am this person. I have this leadership style. It's clear I can improve, and everybody can improve, and you can change. But there are certain core principles in who you probably it's probably from how you were brought up as well, and that you take into leadership, and you say, now these are things I will not compromise on, and come hell or high water, and come the discussion with your boss, because everybody has a boss. and saying that at this point in time, this is what I stand for towards my team. And if I can't stand for that towards my team, customers, organization, etc., then we have a different discussion. For me, I need to leave. Yeah. And that has been, I would say, from a point where perhaps I was in a position where kind of for financial obligations, or perhaps didn't have exactly the courage or the possibility to make that decision right there on the spot. I said, this is something I want to ensure in the future in my career. I'm in a position where if push comes to shove, I can get up and leave the position essentially immediately, and not be forced to stay if it violates my personal beliefs, and certainly if it compromises my leadership style towards my team beyond a certain reasonable level. Of course, it's not black and white, but the more time you spend as a leader, the more you know where those lines are. In certain cases, you might not have that opportunity, but I've made sure in the last at least probably 15 years that I've been in a position where I haven't fortunately needed to do it, but I've been very conscious that if I can't execute the leadership style without compromising myself, my own beliefs, then I have to get up and leave and find something else to do. And I think that's something that every good leader, regardless of your style and who you are and where you, everybody knows they can improve, but you need to have those points where you say up to here and not beyond that, and then you got to be ready to go. And I do think too few people do that. I do think too many people honestly sit back as leaders and take it and accept that their values perhaps are being slightly eroded in their roles. And if it happens slowly, you might not notice it, but if you then look back 2 years later, then you will say that probably was something I should have done something about 2 years ago.
And I think you're right. I think you're right. I think there are very few people out there that set out to change for the worse, let's say. But I think they're, sometimes by a number of factors over an extended period of time, maybe they don't get the result that they quite wanted and things. And it goes back to your point you've said throughout. Authenticity is very important. And I think ultimately, if you have that authenticity, it gives you a good experience within the organization, but it gives your team a good experience. They learn, they do well. And I think all of those things are really key. And that kind of takes me on to, I suppose an interesting question I always like to ask is, looking back on your sort of leadership style, looking back on the teams you've managed, are there any standout stories that you say, this was one I was particularly proud or happy of, I impacted somebody in a certain way? Is there anyone like that stands out for you?
I think the principle of helping people in their careers is perhaps one of the most joyful, and seeing, coming from, perhaps, if I can say, seeing some leaders, I would call them perhaps managers, in the case where you indicate that now I've outgrown my role, I'm ready to move on to something else, and then they immediately start on the defensive and recruiting for your position before you found something else. I've seen that style. My firm belief is that if you, as a leader, are open and your team feel that you're open to discuss their future with them, and perhaps as much as also leaving the company, leaving the country, doing other things, and you help them along on that journey, I find that people want to come to work for you. You can gain that reputation as a leader, that you are helping people along in their career, be it internally in the company, of course, preferably, if you can, but also having the honest discussion and say, honestly, there is no more for you. You can, not pushing you out, but we got to help you find something else outside this organization, because that will serve you better as an individual. And then I would say the biggest joy with that is when you receive a note or a call from an ex-colleague that, let's say, one example would be out of New Zealand, and suddenly, basically a short thank you, unexpected out of the blue, saying, well,
lovely,
thank you for helping me along on this journey. But you're helping yourself as much as a leader, right? Because this goes around, at least in the circles that you work in and in the community, and people say, well, listen, you work for this person. Hopefully it's fun and engaging, and I learned something along the way. But if I'm outgrown my role, the person will actually help me along, be it internally in the company to advance my career, or even externally, without becoming vindictive, because I have shown a level of, if you want to call it, disloyalty.
Yeah. No, and I think as well, even on a personal note, looking inwards, it's wanting to be able to tell a nice story to your kids. I think it's always nice when you can share a little story with your. I've got 2 daughters. It's nice to share a little story with them, and I think to try and, as a father, and show them different examples of how it is to grow up and be a good person. I think it's all good and well saying specific child experience, but if they can see how an adult is doing something as well, I think it's all good. So there's lots of benefits to it as well. In terms of, look, again, I love these conversations. I could make them go on forever, but I'm conscious we haven't got all day. If we were sort of to sort of take a final sort of takeaway point, a sort of golden nugget from today's session, what would be your, if somebody listened to this and they took this point away, that would be fantastic. Do you have something like that? Maybe a takeaway, a one-liner, or it could be more than one-liner, but do you have something like that?
Well, I think we kind of touched upon them, because I think the being authentic and not compromising is actually 2 of the most important factor, and putting yourself in a position where you don't have to compromise. And I think that is perhaps ultimately the most important thing, because compromising on your authenticity and your leadership style is to me the road to, it's not the right road to travel, quite frankly. And a lot of people are unfortunately perhaps sometimes forced by circumstances to compromise.
I think it's a really great way to end today. I think I've really enjoyed some of the topics we've covered. I think it's a great takeaway message there of staying authentic, staying true to yourself. Equally, having that ability to impart that knowledge onto others and help people grow. Again, from my side, thank you so much for your time today, Christian. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll catch you on the next episode. And again, thank you for your time, Christian. Have a great day.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.